Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight we've got a very special guest, filmmaker Anthony DiBlasi, writer, director, producer. How you doing, Anthony?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And I got to say, I don't even have to ask. You are a horror fan. And whenever I have true horror fans as my guest, I love that because we can just have a blast about it. So let's just start. I mean, would you describe yourself as a lifelong horror fan?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was like my parents never said, "Oh, you can't watch that or you can't watch this." So I was watching horror movies. They were renting horror movies at a really young age when I was, 3, 4, 5, and 6. My dad is a bit of a horror fanatic.
I
Um,
remember my first horror movie that I ever saw. It was Halloween. I think I was like five, and I remember there was before cable came to New York City. There was this service called WHT, which it's a box, and it only came on at 8 o'clock at night, and then it went offline sometime like at 2 a.m. in the morning. And that was
yeah.
my first taste ever in horror. I was like 5 or 6, and those images of young Michael Myers putting on the mask in the beginning, opening the drawer, grabbing the knife. For you at a young age, what like memories are like seared into your mind from a horror movie?
Well, my dad was big on the Universal Monsters movies. He's from like an older generation, so I definitely grew up watching those. But Creepers,
Mm,
um, when that lady gets beheaded at the beginning of that film,
yeah,
that's like the first movie, and the bug, the insect pit at the end. That was like the first movie my dad rented when we had a VHS player. So I was young.
yeah.
I must have been like 5 or 6, and that movie just like seared into my brain. And I showed my we watched my wife and I watched it recently because that movie has the weirdest plot line
Yeah.
with this chimpanzee.
It's been years since I've seen it, but I've seen it.
I mean, I forgot, and I'm giving away the spoiler, but essentially the chimpanzee is like the hero in the movie.
Yeah.
So random, when it happens, it was like, this is incredible. This is way better than I imagined it to be.
So you grew up with the monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula,
Yeah.
like Bela Lugosi. My favorite Dracula from back in those days was Christopher Lee. Who was your favorite Dracula?
My favorite Dracula is probably Gary Oldman, but
Yes,
my
he.
dad, my dad he's a huge Bela Lugosi fan.
Yeah,
I was more of like a Wolfman, Lon Chaney and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I kind of lean towards the heavier effects movies.
yeah, yeah. Me too. I loved Gary Oldman in the '90s Dracula. Man, he nailed it. Oh my God, he was amazing. Now, your first credits really are from 2009's Dread. Very successful movie. Uh, Audiences loved it. It has very high scores. Great movie. It's been a while since I've seen it. So that was your first credit, and we know IMDb is not, you got to take it with a big grain of salt. I don't know if it's actually your first actual professional credit or not, but walk us through the process of getting Dread from writing it to actually getting it made, and how hard was it to get it onto the screen?
Well, it was to say the credit thing, and this lends to the answer because my other credits were as producing credits because
Mm-hmm.
when I started working with Clive Barker when I moved to LA, and that
Oh,
was just one of those things. I had gone to school
so
for
wait,
film
so hold on. Clive Barker was your mentor in a way?
for 10 years. Yeah, I
Holy
worked with
shit.
Clive for 10 years.
I'm sorry, but I met Clive Barker several times and I heard the man speak at horror conventions. And I've
Yeah.
described this to my audience before. He is a very normal looking man, but when you hear him speak, the creative, sheer almost disturbed imagination that this brilliant writer has. He's so unique and such an amazing writer and filmmaker. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go on.
No, and speaker. I mean, you're right. I mean, when Clive speaks, you can almost see it written on the page, right? Everything that comes out of his mouth. I think he lives in that mindset. But that's why. So Dread is his short story. Dread is based on the short story by the same name. So like doing that movie, I had already been producing with him. We did, Midnight Meat Train and Book of Blood, and we did these other smaller movies like Saint, Sinner, and The Plague. I was like thrown into it at a very young age. And so I was writing a lot behind the scenes and kind of adapting his material. And, because I'm like, I wrote and I wanted to be like, hey, I have this, there's all these short stories here that aren't being adapted. And Dread was one of those stories we had at another studio. They wanted to make it PG-13. So when we got that back, I had written a draft that was very faithful to his short story, which was R-rated. And then I was kind of at that point where I had been with him, and they knew I wanted to direct. So it was like, hey, I want to direct this film. So it was actually a very easy process. I was surrounded by very trusting producers. I was blessed that way.
Now, do you look back now and say you've had 10 years experience working under Clive Barker and learning from one of the most creative horror minds out there? Do you still keep in contact with Clive?
Yeah, we do. We still talk. We email and stuff, and he's writing a lot now. And yeah, I mean, that was just, I don't, you can't trade that for anything,
No,
right? I mean, all those years under someone like him and working so closely with him, it was, it sculpted my career and my approach to filmmaking.
that's an honor right there. I did not know that, and that is just absolutely fascinating. Is there a particular subgenre in horror that you're attracted to the most?
It's funny because I don't make movies like I like to watch movies, which I don't know why. I think it's something I need to reconcile in my brain because the movies that I really like to watch are more movies like Boys and Fright Night and American Werewolf in London
Love
and
those.
like these creature movies that have a lot of effects because really it was the effects that really is why I loved horror. When I was younger, I wanted to get into special effects and special effects makeup. And then, you kind of are like, oh, I like to write and direct, and then it becomes something else. But it's those kinds of movies that I always revisit every Halloween and things like that. It's those kind of films that I love.
Okay. All right. Now, going back to Clive Barker for a second, were you with him? I mean, I think it must have been after that he had done Hellraiser, correct?
Yeah, it was after he had not been making movies for quite a while. When I started working with him, he was writing this children's book series called Aberrat, and then we were trying to reinvigorate his film side. So he had already been out of it. He Lord of Illusions was in the 90s. I didn't start working with Clive until 2002.
Oh, okay. So it's way after Hellraiser and
Yeah.
Nightbreed. But I'm sure you've seen his movies and stuff. What do you think
Oh,
of his style of filmmaking?
I think Clive was always like a true auteur. Even the few movies he made, he had a very distinct style. If you watch like Hellraiser
Hmm.
and Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions, you can see that thing that kind of comes out of them, similar to like John Carpenter or Scorsese.
Yeah,
They
he's
have that identity in their filmmaking.
yeah, very unique. You can watch it like you just said and know that it's a Clive Barker film.
Yeah.
Now, I hear a lot of people say that the horror genre is underrated, it's not respected. I don't really see that. I see horror being at its peak right now, but I think to some degree, horror people in the horror industry like to sort of hold on and latch on to that theory that our genre is not very appreciated, it's
Yeah.
underrated, and it's sort of used as a tagline. Even though horror is, I would say, one of the top three most popular genres out there right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like, I think we're in a very mainstream era of horror, and
Hmm.
but with places like Shudder, there's so many new films on there. There's so much horror being made and good stuff. It's
Hmm.
not like, but then you also have people packing the theaters to see horror. It's doing very well. I mean, I think you're completely right. I think like obviously fans, we like to think that like, you know, hey, I have this VHS copy of
Yeah,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like it's crazy. It's gonna blow your mind. Like let me show you this thing. You like to cure. I think horror fans are curators in that way.
yeah,
We want to share that experience with someone. Oh, you've never seen this movie?
yeah.
You have to see this movie. It's like a rite of passage.
I totally get it. Now, independent movies are vital not only to horror but to the entire entertainment industry. How do you feel about the impact indie movies have in the entertainment industry and in particular the horror industry?
I mean, I think, indie film is extremely important, in things like horror and drama. I think that's where a lot of filmmakers actually, it's where they make their marks, they just start their careers. But you can also do a lot more and control the content, right? You can be edgier, you can push the boundaries in independent filmmaking where if you're doing like a studio picture or a big budget picture, you can't really do that.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of input from a lot of different people.
Now, you've done independent films, correct?
For sure.
What is, let's say someone comes to you and let's say they're writing or they have a great script. I love hearing filmmakers, writers, directors when I talk to them, and they all have their own advice to people who actually want to make a film. Uh, the latest, I forgot who it was, said that make sure you have the whole thing planned out from start all the way to post production and then working your way to a distributor. What advice would you give somebody who is looking into making a film?
I think there's so many different paths and it's hard. I think the first thing you do, if you don't have finances, then just make a short. Do whatever you can to put something together to make a short. I didn't really start making shorts. I've made a few shorts throughout my career, but it's not where I started. In college and stuff, I did. But I think it's funny. Like I think the more you make movies, you kind of feel like you're in a box more and more. You feel like, oh, I need a certain budget, or I need to write it a certain way, or I need to do it to a certain level. And you have to almost forget that mindset. I think to be a new filmmaker, you can do anything
Yeah,
as long as you can be creative and you can make anything. Also in horror fans will accept anything. You can go shoot a movie on an iPhone. If it's told well and it's scary,
yeah,
people will watch it.
yeah.
People will watch that movie. So you can make a movie with no budget. You just got to do it. But you also got to write. I think you got to write or make friends with a writer so you can tell a good story. If you're not a writer yourself, be friends with writers and get a good script. I wouldn't just say, hey, let's throw a camera on and shoot
No,
something.
no, absolutely. I say, my opinion is if you've got a great script, even if you have a zero budget, if the script is there and you can find the right actors to bring that script to life, you can make it happen on a very low budget, and especially in horror,
Yep.
which you can do it very, very cheaply. Now, going back to your college days, did you go to college and you study filmmaking, or is that something that happened later on for you?
No, I did. I went to Emerson College in
Hmm.
Boston, um, where I grew up, and they have a pretty big school in Los Angeles now too, but they didn't at the time. But yeah, so I studied film at Emerson. Emerson was excellent for that because they really just gave you the equipment, let you taught, you were making movies and you were getting your hands dirty along the way. So I recommend that school.
Okay. Now, did you
But
know, like from high school or even before, that this is what you wanted to do, whether it was writing, directing, but filmmaking is what you wanted to do?
for sure, at a very young age, I mean, I remember being like 6 years old and watching Star Wars documentaries, right? Like on PBS, like you get the behind the scenes, the
Yeah.
model making and stuff. I always wanted to get into movies because my father is a movie fanatic. He grew up wanting to get into movies and never did. It was kind of that thing like, oh, oh, I had a dream and I never did it. So it was like I at a very young age wanted to get into film and kind of pursued that relentlessly for a long time.
And it paid off. It paid off. Now, I let's go into Last Shift. I think I watched it again the other night for what I believe was like around the fifth time. I love that movie. It's a great story, and it's really, in essence, a one character story.
Yeah.
So, what was the inspiration? Because you wrote it. What was your inspiration for writing Last Shift?
I made a couple movies with these producers in Florida, and Scott Poiley, he's the co-writer on Last Shift. He was the producer, and he produced a movie called Casadega I did, and a movie called Missionary that I did. I did not write either of those, and we had made those two movies, and I had said to him, "Hey, I have this idea to do something really contained that we had this excellent sound team that we got to know really well, and I felt like we weren't taking advantage of them. I wanted to make a movie that was very sound driven, very,
Mm-hmm.
like a fun house horror ride. You just get on, you hold on for 90 minutes and you're out, and you scare them as much as you can in that amount of time. So that's what I approached them with, and we started to develop it and talk about how do we utilize sound, where would we want to be. And when we were writing, we were location scouting at the same time, so it really molded what we were writing.
Mm-hmm.
What the police station was going to look like, who the character was going to be, and that's how it started. We always wanted to do something that was like a kind of a Manson-esque inspired ghost story,
Yeah.
and it evolved into Last Shift.
It's a great movie, and like I said, I was watching it again the other day, knowing that you would be on the show, and I'm like, okay, I find myself analyzing movies more and more these days. Like, what makes this so special? Well, it's scary as shit. It's a really scary movie. The casting is great, and now let's go to Joshua Michael, who was our guest last year. He plays the deceased cult leader, um, Payman. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, I assume you had control of casting. Uh, did you cast Joshua?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Now,
we did all our casting in Florida.
okay. Now, Joshua gets picked to play these bad attitude characters. Okay, I don't know if it's just the looks that he has, the long hair, the bad boy look. What made you go with Joshua? Who you know him. I've met him too. He cannot be furthest from that in real life. He's like one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. But he does a great job at portraying these prick characters, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And in Last Shift, he was a cult leader. So, what did you see in Joshua that you said, you know what, he's going to be Payman?
Well, he's got that charm. He's got that like redneck charm, right? And that's kind of what we were looking for with that character. And it was funny because he was probably one of the youngest people that came in for the part, because we were seeing a lot of older characters for it. You're thinking like, oh, is he that more distinguished kind of father figure? But when he came in, he really embraced that kind of younger Manson persona.
Yeah.
He really does. When he talks, he kind of draws you in. I think that was a big part of it, because he had a lot of when he's on the camera, when he's talking to you, he really is. If he's not a charming character, you won't believe that he's some cult leader.
Yeah, yeah. And as we see in real life, almost every cult leader is this charismatic, can sell ice to an Eskimo type of a person.
Yeah,
Uh, Now, there are characters throughout the movie that come and go. Some questions. In the beginning of the film, we see when Officer Cohen comes into the station that it's its last night. Uh, they're turning off the lights on the old station and they're all moving to the new station. And she meets the sergeant, I believe, who's
yeah,
throwing a fit. And then we don't see him again till the end, where Officer Cohen has been just put through the ringer and his payment, who is a ghost, spirit, whatever you want to call him, is making her see things. What is the sergeant's character? Well, first of all, do you think that the police force that was there since the incident happened, the suicide that took place in that jail, did everybody there know that it was haunted after that event?
yeah. I mean, we kind of saw it that way that it's hard for people like the police to admit, like, oh, I'm afraid to be in this police station, right? And I think that was something that comes up in a conversation later, that place was haunted, but nobody wanted to talk about it, right? We just wanted to get out of there. And with Grip Cohen at the beginning, the sergeant, he's when she enters the building, he's like freaking out at the end of the hall. He's banging on the lockers. He's angry and agitated.
Mm-hmm.
And to us, that was like he just had an account. He's dealing with these things too. He's in the building alone. He's seeing things, and it angers him. When he sees something. So when she just walks in and he's pissed. He's banging these lockers, and then he's very, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
And you notice when he approaches her, he tells her to turn around.
And she walks away and he's like, stop.
Yeah. And he wants to get like a 360 view of her. And that was a foreshadow of that scene later with the other officer that is Ghost.
He wanted to see if she was real.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Now that makes a whole bunch more sense. And then we see as the movie progresses, the officer who comes in, who we find out is dead. He has a big hole in the back of his head. He's the one that reveals to Officer Cohen, Lauren, the character Lauren, that ever since that suicide, this place is haunted. So he's that officer is sort of warning her that, hey, not everything here is safe. And I love how that was added. It didn't, that information was not passed on to her by a fellow living officer, was passed on to her by a ghost.
Yeah, we thought it would be fun to do a scene. It's like, lots of movies have these reveals like, oh, that person's dead, oh, that, but we were like, well, what if this guy's actually a character? What if they have a really meaningful scene together?
Yeah.
And almost even a flirtation at times. And then he leaves and he's like, shit, this guy's dead.
He's got a big hole in the back of his head. Now, Juliana Harkavy, who's going to be our guest on Tuesday, she plays Officer Lauren Cohen. She did a fantastic job. She basically bore the weight of the whole movie on her shoulders. When it came time to cast Officer Cohen, was it difficult for you guys to find the right person? Did you go through a lot of people before finally settling on Juliana?
Juliana, we had known Juliana. We met her when we were auditioning for another film. And we brought her up specifically. It was either Scott or I who was like, what about Juliana Harkavy? Let's see if she wants to do it. Simultaneously, you're always covering your boundaries. We were casting in Los Angeles. We were doing tapes and self-reads and stuff like that. But we basically offered Juliana the part. I mean, I do not remember us even reading her. Mm-hmm, she may debate that. So don't, I may be wrong, but I don't remember auditioning her for the role.
I'll ask her on Tuesday.
Knew she could act. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, she went on to achieve after last shift so much success and is still
Oh,
so
yeah.
successful. She became a big part of the DC Arrow universe.
Yeah.
She's a great actress,
Yeah.
and you guys could not have picked a better person to take on such a heavy role. It was really a one character movie. I mean, yeah, we had people come in and out, and then of course the ghosts in the cell that made it so scary. But she bore the whole weight of the movie, and she did a great job, and a lot of credit to her. Now, you had said in a previous interview that you wanted to push the boundaries of what you can do with the whole sound that you
Yeah.
mentioned a little while ago. What are some of the ways you experimented with sound? What different techniques did you try and see which would work the best? Like if someone is watching the movie, which scenes would you tell them, hey, pay attention to this part right here?
Well, so it's an interesting journey with the sound, and there's obviously the stuff you get to in post production where you try to, you mix on an excellent. We had access to an excellent stage. You mix in, the movie is really meant to be seen in a theater. We
Mm-hmm.
mixed for, a 7.1 surround, and there is excellent surround sound in it. So there's all that part of it where the scene that's completely in the dark when she's stuck in the cell and the lights go out.
Mm-hmm.
The sound design in that scene is what carries the whole thing. But what I say, why it was so important, the sound design element, and why we put so much emphasis on it was in pre-production. So we had this abandoned police station where we shot, and both in pre-production, we had the sound team come out and essentially go around the entire building and record sounds. They would just fuck with stuff. They would
Mm-hmm.
mess. They would create eerie sounds with the textures of the actual building we shot in. We did all the singing there, all the girls singing, in different stages, and then the day after we finished production shooting, we went in there and we almost directed like a stage improv with sound design. The sound team set up mics all over the building, all at the same time. We had like 10 or 15 mics going at any given time. And we improved scenarios with these actors, creating all these, scary voices and attacking the Payman family, attacking these girls. And it was a day of improv of sound design. So
Wow.
when I was editing the movie, I could pull from this entire library of sound we made. I could create a soundscape while I was editing the film of like, oh, this is what she hears, this is how she hears it, and we have all these different voices. I could curate everything that we recorded, and then in post, then the sound team took it and actually did the real work.
Yeah.
But it was all laid out from such a long process from pre-production that every sound in that movie is recorded. That
Yeah.
is recorded in the location.
That is so cool. And I called her Lauren. I got screwed up. Her character's name is
Yes.
Jessica Cohen. Um, and I totally see it now. And it's very noticeable in the movie when it comes to the sound. Like when the air conditioner ducts, the air conditioner starts blowing, and these bangs that when the character of Jessica looks up, it appears it's just rusty pipes, old pipes. And yeah, as a person who, Jessica doesn't at that point really, we don't think she believes in ghosts, you can easily write it off as old. It's an old building. It's being closed down. It's just a building making its strange noises. Now, throughout the movie, when you were directing it, was there any sequence that was challenging, like when she was locked in that cell in the dark, which was really freaky? She drops her flashlight. All of a sudden, somebody picks up the flashlight, and she's like really starts freaking out. She gets
Yeah.
locked in there. What sequence was challenging for you to, direct and actually shoot?
The one that was the most challenging, and listen, I don't know why it just turned out this way, is the thing we call the chair sequence.
Yeah.
She enters that. I mean, it's complicated because there was a lot of coordination with the videotapes and she's watching these three TVs on the wall, and the Paymans are essentially talking to her, and they're saying different things in different TVs, and then the chairs, there's things riding the chairs and they're spinning around, and we wrote the sequence and we're like, we wanted to make it scary. We shot that over, could never finish it. So we kept, because we were essentially in this one location, we could stop a scene and then come back to it. We came back to that scene like 4 times. We can just never get it done. So it was shot over the course of the entire schedule. We keep going back to the scene. Oh, let's go back to the chair scene. We're not done with it yet.
That's funny because one of that chair scene, I actually had it as a question. I was going to ask you about that, if that was, particularly hard to shoot, and obviously it was. Now, in the end of the movie, let's just jump to the end. This woman has been put through the ringer, like I mentioned earlier, and the payment ghost, she starts hallucinating. Not hallucinating. They start making her see these hazmat people who are supposedly coming in to pick up the hazmat material. She starts seeing them as the ghosts, and that's when the superior officer comes in. The sergeant has to shoot her to take her down. How exactly did you come up with that concept when you were putting the script together? Like, this is how we should end the film.
I don't remember entirely. I know that in the writing process, we wanted to have, it wasn't something we planned from the get-go. I think while we were writing, I honestly think we had these characters, this hazmat crew, and then decided, at the end, when we were writing, well, these people, sometimes things happen like that. These kind of B stories fall into place. You're like, these people say they're coming, so how about they come? And by this point, she's so far gone. She's so far broken in the sense that, is it in her head? Is this place haunted? Is she possessed by this point? That she doesn't know what she's seeing anymore. And, that kind of twist at the end that she killed these people, hopefully has a big impact and people don't see it coming. I really love that. We shot that whole sequence, we did in one take.
Wow.
Where she's, it was one of those things, we choreographed every moment of it, and we had live fire and when you watch it, you can see when she's shooting the gun, all the particle board is falling down. It's like the dust raining down on her, because it was all staged in this one. Our Austin, our DP, did a great job in that sequence. We had no lights. It was her with a flashlight and us timing these kills. And what we did in that sequence is that we pre-painted the gore. So the makeup team, the effects team, put the gore on the wall, and then the person would have to be exactly in that spot and stage the kill shot.
Yeah.
And then in post, we painted it out. So when she'd go down the hall, we painted the blood out. And then when he gets shot, we reveal the gore. Because we didn't do CG blood. We wanted to do real blood. That's how we did.
That's pretty cool. So you're definitely a fan of practical effects as opposed to CGI.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, CG is, what's a kind of a bummer, as a lot of movies, I think, you look at a movie like The Tomorrow War. It was a fun film.
Very fun. But
you look at the creatures, and they're all CG, and they look great. But then you look at, I don't know if you've seen the actual creatures. Like,
no.
I keep seeing them in my Instagram feed. I think Spectral Motion Effects did them. And they're incredible. They're so cool. And you're like, why wasn't that in the movie? Because it has a life to it.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these guys, they make these incredible creatures, and then they all get replaced with VFX later, which is kind of a bummer.
I love the name they gave those creatures, the white hooks, or what are they called?
Yeah.
The white, white spears, white hooks, something like that. That was crazy.
Something with a hook or a dart.
Yeah, And speaking of creatures, I saw A Quiet Place 2 the other night. I finally got a
Yeah.
chance to see that. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah, yeah, we saw when it came out.
We got a better look of the aliens in the second movie than the quick glances we got in the first movie. Very unique, creative.
Yeah.
What'd you think of those creatures?
I love
Being a
those.
monster fan.
Yeah, I love those creature designs, and also the heads, especially, right, is
Yeah, where it opens.
where all opens. I mean, they have that kind of Resident Evil
Mm-hmm.
design, but they take it to this new level with the head design. And I've never seen. I would love to see. I wonder if they did practical on those sets because I'd love to see if they did practical creatures. I bet they exist. I'd love to
Yeah,
see in
there
person.
were. Yeah, I'm leaning. I mean, there might have been some practical, but man, those they were very. Some of those in scenes, especially where it's crawling and like walking upside down on that elevated
Yeah,
platform.
yeah,
Those were scary creatures. They could
yeah.
move quickly. They're absolutely terrifying. Now, last shift, you mentioned in a prior interview that you guys shot it in 10 days. Was that strictly because of budgetary constraints, or was that just enough time that you guys had to do a film, which, like you said, was contained in one location?
Well, so like when I'm making a movie, my motto is like never put anything in front of the camera that doesn't look good,
Hmm.
right? Because people have expectations for when they go see a film, and you're controlling this little box. And what I wanted to do, because we were making that movie on a very low budget, and I know that if I cut my days, I'm going to have more money to put on the screen. So that's what we did. We condensed the schedule so much that we could take those extra days of shooting and put that money into each day that we had. And at the beginning, it was kind of a spitball number. We were like, let's do it. I mean, honestly, we said this schedule from one of the earliest days we talked about. Hey, we're before the script was written. I said 10 days,
Okay.
and we stuck with that number probably because my producer held me to it. But it was an educated guess at how many days can we do this in, and
Okay.
10 days was the number, and we stuck with it.
And it worked out. Now, I don't remember because I did not see the movie right away when it came out. Did it have a theatrical release or did it go straight to Blu-ray DVD?
It did. In the States, it was a Blu-ray streaming release.
Okay.
Back did I mean it did we played like Fright Fest in London, but it it was mainly, I don't know if it played any theaters here when it first came out.
Were you very pleasantly surprised on how well it was received by viewers and they loved it?
Definitely, we were very happy. We were, it's always that thing when you set out like I want to make a scary movie, when you say we want to make this as scary as possible and we want to freak people out,
Yeah.
and we felt like we got that response back that people were if they say anything about the movie, they say, well, it scared me, so that's good, we did our job.
Yeah, yeah, that's the whole point of a horror movie. Now, the whole payment storyline, not as for a sequel, but more as a prequel, you could have really run with that. Is it A, you just didn't want to do it? You wanted to leave the movie alone as it is and not, mess with a prequel? Were you approached about a possible sequel, prequel? Or how did that play out, if it played out at all?
We, early in the early days, Scott and I talked about doing a prequel when we kind of batted it back and forth for a while. And I think that we just got busy writing other things and doing kind of other things that we never went back to it. But never say never is what I'm
Okay.
saying
All
now.
right. All right. I think it would be great. And I'm sure Joshua would be game for that too. Bring him back as payment. That would be awesome. Now, when Jessica is in her biggest moments of distress in the movie, she is reciting like the policeman's motto. Why is that? Why is that so important? Is it a tribute to her dad, who was also a cop, and I believe he died in the line of duty? And it basically is what keeps her in the building, as opposed to abandoning her post and getting the hell out of there.
And that's the big thing of it. I think when people watch horror movies, especially haunted house films, right? There's always that thing that the writers and filmmakers have to get around. Why do they stick around?
Yeah,
You know, the why. Why do they stay? Why do they? If it's a movie that, and a lot of it comes down to a simple thing is like financially, they can't leave. But you always have to, your audience has to do that buy-in of like, why does she stay? And we want to do something. I Payman is all about devotion, right? His devoted followers. We wanted that to be the same with her. She's devoted to something her father died for.
yeah.
That oath of being a police officer, she is taking it, all the way. And there's that pressure from her peers too. Are you going to be the real deal? Are you going to be as good as your father was? She's getting some shame along the way from the sergeant and things like that. Like, are you telling me you're afraid of some noises in a building, stuff like that? But it really is that devotion to her father of wanting to make him proud. That's why she sees this through to the end,
And
which
it,
is essentially her Achilles heel.
yeah, and in the beginning of the movie, just before she goes into that station, you have the opposite of that. You have her mother calling her and telling her this is a bad idea. I don't feel comfortable with this. But she wants to stay loyal and devoted to what her dad did, and she wanted to follow in his footsteps. So I love the little irony there, like the phone call from the mom and the events of that night and the hell that she's being put through. She still wants to stay true to her dad. Uh, One scene that was very touching was when she opens up his locker and
Mm.
finds the picture of her dad and herself as a little girl. How important do you think that was to the script?
Yeah, I think that was a really big moment. And even though a movie's scary or it's a horror movie, I like, Scott and I both like movies that had that emotional hook to it. Something that, when she's having this moment where she finds this photograph, and it's a good way to just tell people what kind of relationship she had with her dad and how she feels about it now. And then when you go to that scene that Juliana knocked out of the park when
Mm-hmm.
she's getting a phone call from her father,
Oh
and
yeah,
she's hearing her father's voice again, you really believe that moment. She's essentially, I did it for you. And it's kind of heartbreaking. I mean, her performance is heartbreaking in
it
that
is.
moment.
She was great. Now, when you were doing the research on how you wanted to portray the payment and the cults, his cult, it was almost spot on identical to the whole Manson family that happened. Did you look into other cults in real life and draw any inspiration from other cults, or did you concentrate solely on Charles Manson and what he and his followers did?
I'm, we looked at a lot of people like Richard Ramirez,
Mm-hmm.
not a
The
leader,
Night
but we were
Stalker.
looking at a lot of like serial killers at the beginning. Watching a lot of footage from them, and then a lot of the cult stuff I think basically was centered on the Manson family's behavior. I got my hands on this great documentary called Manson, which was released when he was in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie won an Academy Award, but it never got released because one of the, I think it was, I can't remember, it was Twiggy or one of the other members tried to assassinate the president, or, I don't know,
Yeah.
attempt an assassination on the president. And because of that trial, they couldn't release the movie because she was in the movie to such a large extent. So it got old. but it was still nominated for an Academy Award that year.
I did not
But
know that.
you can watch it. You can get it on you can get it on Amazon. Literally, when I ordered it, it came from one of the former members of the Manson family.
Wow.
It was like made by that person, and they sent me a DVD of it, and he signed it and stuff. He distributed this movie himself. It's an excellent film.
That's fascinating. I'm going to check that out. Now, moving forward in your career, is there anything in the works? Do you have a bunch of stories that you're trying to get picked up? What's in store for you moving forward now?
For the last several years, been doing a ton of writing and also other genre stuff. My wife and I have been writing together, so we're at that point now. There's a lot of percolating
Yeah.
things that are about to come into fruition. But I had jumped out of the genre for a bit to do some other things, and then my wife and I concentrated on some thriller stuff. So it's been a long time since I've been in kind of the horror
Mm-hmm.
realm writing, but just now Scott and I are actually writing something together that's going to be horror. So
Cool, cool. And is everything that you're working on is going to go through the independent film circuit, through festivals and stuff like that when it does get made?
some yes, some no.
Okay, okay.
I can't announce yet.
No, no, no. Don't want to spoil any secrets. That's really fascinating. Looking back on your career, which whether it's a writing, directing project, which one do you look back on with the most, proud feelings, that you're the proudest of?
Definitely Dread and Last Shift, and those are both movies that I wrote or co-wrote. Both had. It's a much different process when you direct a movie that you've taken from the writing stage. You're so intimate with it, and you're so close to the material. It becomes second nature when you're directing, and you can be on your feet more when you're doing it and be more. I like to improv a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you can do that more with your own material. Um,
Yeah.
and those are two films that I'm really proud of.
I've spoken to a lot of writers who have directed their stuff, and I always say to them, man, it must be so, I guess, liberating to have the work that you wrote and to be able to see it through the vision of putting it on the screen. You wrote it, and now you have the control of how you want to present it to the audience.
Yeah.
Do you feel that's I mean that's completely awesome. I've never done it obviously, but it sounds like it would be completely amazing.
Yeah, and listen, I feel like when you're directing, when you're in the moment, you can't appreciate it because you got like you got your like directing hat on.
Yeah.
But then I think when you're watching the footage later, you're like, oh yeah, we wrote those words, we created that character, we worked with the actors to create those characters, and we made that horror gag and it worked. Like it's like a magic trick, right? It's
Yeah.
like I invented a magic trick when you create a horror gag that works well.
Now
It's like
for our viewers who have not yet watched Last Shift, I just saw it the other night, but I have so many streaming channels, and I start a movie, and I'm like, which channel am I watching this on? Where is Last Shift currently available? Besides people renting and buying it on places like Vudu and Amazon, is there a place where it's streaming as part of a subscription service?
I think it just went on Tubi.
Okay.
Someone just posted this the other day, but I think it just went up on Tubi. Um, but it's not on Shutter or Netflix at the moment.
No. I mean, I
Um,
purchased it on Vudu, so I know that's where I saw it. I own it
yeah,
on
I think
Vudu.
it's on Tubi right now, and it may be. It's like I don't. It's I never know unless someone like says it, and it's like, oh, okay, it's on there, and then I'll like promote it. But it's like people they don't tell you.
No.
It's not like the distributor years later is like, hey guys, this is where it's going now. No,
No.
nobody lets you know. You just kind of find out when everyone else does.
I know that personally because I have a distributor now. All of my shows are going to Screenbox, and
Yeah,
we're always the
Brad.
last ones to find out.
Yeah, the last ones to find out. Yeah. Like, oh, that's cool.
Like I know this show is premiering in a couple of weeks, next in early August, but I have no idea when, and I'm probably
Yeah.
not going to find out till I read it somewhere on the internet. But
Yeah.
it's just really funny. Uh, Last question before we got to go. But how did you find working with and directing Juliana as an actress? She's absolutely talented, great actress. How did you find working with her? You said
You're
you sort of knew her. You didn't really audition anybody else. How was it
you're just
like?
asking that because she's coming on. You want a good soundbite. She was horrible. No. No, she's obviously a fantastic actress. I mean, to yeah, the fact that we met her, she was like too young to play the part that we were casting in the other movie. And when we did this, the fact that we remembered, and she was the thing is we were casting, we were auditioning people in Los Angeles, but there were actors that were in the area, either in North Carolina and Florida, she was clearly a stronger actress.
Yeah,
And now you see like where her career's gone, right? So she's gotten so much work because to carry a whole movie like that, essentially it's a stage play.
it
I mean,
is.
there's not like 1 second she's not on camera, right? And it's also exhausting to shoot in a 10-day period. So, not only was she a trooper on set, she's a great actress and can do,
Yeah,
did everything I asked with emotion wise and stuff.
yeah. And
She's ex-
she is excellent, and I'm really looking forward to talking to her on Tuesday. We're going to get deeper into her take and what it was like for her to be in that room in the dark and how that all played out and her feelings. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Juliana on Tuesday. Anthony, it's been an absolute blast talking to you.
been
Like I
great.
said, I love talking to true horror fans and especially filmmakers. And it's been an honor, and I want to thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your experiences. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing a lot more of your stuff coming on the screen very soon. So
Love being on. Thanks for having me.
absolutely, this has been a great conversation. Thank you again. I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in. We have quite a nice audience tonight. And when you have a good conversation going, Anthony, because the chats go silent. That means everybody's listening.
Good. Good.
So, anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Anthony for being our guest tonight. Till tomorrow night, guys. And like I said, Juliana, who plays Officer Lauren in Last Shift, is going to be our guest right here on Tuesday nights. You guys want to definitely tune in for that. Thank you to Anthony DiBlasi for joining us. Any final thoughts before we go?
I mean, I'll be tuning in on Tuesday. I gotta see what it says about me.
Exactly, exactly. We got to watch out. Everybody stay safe. And until tomorrow, stay walking. Good night.